Get ready for a thought-provoking conversation. But here's the deal. It's a conversation that's a little out of this world and a rare departure from our usual subject matter. But I am excited, no doubt. I'm excited to share an interview with you from a guest that I've gotten to know and I'm fascinated with. I've had a few conversations with him on the phone. He was recently on Joe Rogan a few weeks ago, and Joe Rogan has asked him to come back on the program to debate someone. This guy is no joke, and some of you might know who my next guest is. His name is BART SIBREL. How did I meet him, you ask? Why is he coming on my small little channel? The guy that's helping me get my teeth fixed, the multi-millionaire dude, he probably doesn't want me to say that. But I haven't disclosed who he is. If I did, I would have all of you. Joking. He put me in touch with him, and it was a match made in heaven. So let me tell you a little bit about my next guest, BART SIBREL. He's a filmmaker. He's an investigator who's made a name for himself in the podcast community, even before YouTube, but on YouTube also. And how did he do that? He made a name for himself by questioning the moon landing. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe I know what some of you are thinking. This hasn't been debunked. Or some of you are thinking, hasn't this been debunked? And yes, for many of us, the moon landing is a historical fact. Some of you will be like, this is poppycock. I'm not watching this. But there's this thing. Just because someone has a different opinion, it doesn't mean we should think less of them. So don't think less of me because I'm very skeptical about the moon landing, and I am. In fact, it's a great reminder that even respected figures in our church, like our prophet Joseph Fielding Smith, who was the 10th president of the church. He was the nephew of Joseph Smith, the first president and prophet of the church. He was the grandson, he is the grandson of Hiram Smith, and the son of the 5th prophet of the church, Joseph F. Smith, who was the son of Hiram and the nephew of the prophet Joseph Smith. Joseph Fielding Smith initially doubted that we would reach the moon. And then he admitted that he was wrong. But then I wonder if he was wrong and maybe he knew that he was still right and maybe he did it for the rest of the world, or maybe he just thought he was wrong later. But I feel like what he said was prophetic. And let's be real. If governments can be wrong about so many things, then why not this? Why not this? Brothers and sisters, why not this? So whether you are a moon landing believer or a skeptic, I invite you to approach the table, this conversation, with an open mind. Please. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I believe in conspiracy facts. And this was an interesting conversation. Well, actually, most of it was just me listening to him, and it was interesting, to say the least. So, without further ado, let's talk to BART SIBREL. Welcome to the last dispensation. You're living in it. All right, folks, I bet you didn't think that I would have somebody like this on my program, and you're wondering what I'm talking about or who I'm talking about. His name is BART SIBREL, and he's a filmmaker, writer. He's an investigative journalist. No, it wasn't
president of the world.
He's president of the world. He suffers from grandiosity. No, He's known for conspiracy facts. Um, he's the Apollo moon landing guy. He's been on Joe Rogan. How many times were you on Joe Rogan?
Once so far. He wants me to come back and debate somebody. So we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, I ended up watching that thing, and that was definitely the devil's advocate on his part, like to the upteenth level. I didn't like that. I know now. I know what you're talking about. So we're talking about the moon landing. 1969 and 1972 were staged, or you say, by NASA under the control of the CIA. You've written, produced, and you directed films, documentaries promoting these ideas, including A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. That was 2001. And Astronauts Gone Wild, an investigation into the authenticity of the moon landings. And that was 2004. Sibrel's work often involves confronting astronauts.
Well, then often, I think unfortunately you're reading the government website of my bio. Go to sibrel.com, read my.
Let's do that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But it doesn't often involve. I did one film one time where I, confronted a bunch of liars, traitors to our country, and said you hadn't fooled me, and we just were on the Bible that what you said was the truth, and few would do it. So.
Well, let's see here.
Just before we began,
yeah,
conspiracy theorist, the real word, it's just truth seeker, or you could say government critic. Are we naive enough to believe a bunch of liars who have been caught lying time and time again, but they assure us this time they're telling the truth, so.
Well, yes, and I'm going to get to my audience. I told you they're 90% of them are Utah, Idaho based. And I'm going to get to an interesting little fun fact here in a minute that you might like. But let's just get to the chase here. You met with, well, here we go. Filmmaker, investigative journalist BART SIBREL's decades-long research about is that it? No, here's your biography.
Oh, go to sibrel.com.
I did. I'm here.
And you go to about.
Okay, let me go here.
And it matters.
No. This is
about anything.
Yeah, but you put a lot of work into this, brother, so you deserve this. So you are an award-winning. I'm going to edit this anyway. You're an award-winning filmmaker, writer, investigative journalist. I read this. Documentaries, music videos, TV commercials, stage plays for over 40 years, starting at the age of 18, hosting your own television talk show. You've owned 5 video production companies. You've been very successful, employed by 2 of the 3 major networks, worked as a television news reporter, produced videos, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, TLC, USA, and BET. Sibrel has also appeared as a seasoned actor on the stage and screen over 500 times. Articles featuring Sibrel's films have been published in Times Magazine, the New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, awards from American Motion Picture Society, including Best Cinematography, Best Editing, and Top 10 Director. And I could go on and on and on.
Oh, I make really good quesadillas.
Excellent.
Extra sharp white cheddar cheese. That's the secret. Oh, not anymore.
It's okay. Well, you know what? Let's just start from here. You've met, how many astronauts did you meet that supposedly landed on the moon?
Well, supposedly landed or orbited officially on the record. I've met 8 of them. And I produced a film I'm best known for called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which you can see for free on the homepage of sibrel.com. It's just my last name.com, S as in Sam, I-B as in boy, R-E-L. It's called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. That and the follow-up film cost nearly $1 million. We were financed by an anonymous person who builds rockets for NASA, who knows that the moon missions were fake. I was producing the film under the theory it might be fake. I don't know. I kind of worshiped the moon landings as a kid. I was 4 years old, asleep in bed at the time, but my
Mm-hmm.
father was in the Air Force, and we now know from an eyewitness that the fake moon landing was filmed at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968. And so my father was in that circle and got a VIP package of Apollo 11 prints of them allegedly on the moon, which were actually filmed at Cannon Air Force Base and a moon set. And the guy who
Wow.
confessed goes into detail about how they built it over several weeks and the description of it. And as a kid, I was mesmerized. I thought, this is great, glorious moon missions, right? And at being in the Air Force, we moved about every 2 years, and whatever house I moved to, I had a prominent place in my bedroom with all these pictures, right, in a row next to each other. So over the course of like 4 to 14 years old, or that 10 years, saying I saw the pictures at least once a day, but probably 3 times a day going in and out of your bedroom, that's over 10,000 times
Right.
believing that these pictures were on the moon. And then as a 14-year-old, I saw a TV program with a gentleman who worked as a NASA contractor with very high security clearance, who said he would edit memos between von Braun and the Pentagon, and that von Braun, the rocket designer, warned him, the Pentagon, that they could not go to the moon within the Kennedy goal, that the odds are 1 in 10,000 chance going with 1960s technology, and that they bluffed, like in poker, that you can actually win when you have a bad hand if you pretend you have a good hand, and that's what
Yeah.
they chose to do. We have an eyewitness who helped fake the moon landing, who, as he was dying, fearing the judgment of God, the first thing he confessed was that he was a murderer. And as you know, if you told me your Christian religious beliefs, that if you confess your sin and renounce them, you're forgiven. And King David, a man after God's own heart, not only committed adultery, murdered her husband to cover it up. Now,
Right.
there were consequences from that, lost his kingdom. Read the book of First and Second Samuel about that. And But it appears he was forgiven, and because he repented. And so this guy's dying, fearing the judgment of God. And the first thing he says is that he killed somebody. His son was there, and he said, "Well, who did you kill?" He said, "Well, I killed a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968." And the son was concerned that the family might not have closure. Maybe the guy just disappeared. It's a military base. And so he brought in the military police who investigated the homicide, and his son was there at that time. And when they got around to, asking, why did you kill this person? He said, well, they built the fake moon landing set in 1968 for a couple of weeks. They had 2 airplane hangars that were side by side. They took down the wall between them to create a big set. They brought in all this pulverized concrete powder to simulate the moon surface. They painted the walls matte black. They brought in an official lunar lander from NASA. And on June 1st, they commenced the filming of the TV images of the moon mission, which took 3 days. And President Johnson was there out of morbid curiosity the first day of filming. Now, our source at Cannon Air Force Base, he was the chief of security for the entire base. And every military branch has their intelligence special ops division. There's naval intelligence and army intelligence, marine intelligence, and the United States Air Force intelligence is at Cannon Air Force Base, where our source was chief of security. President Johnson gave him a list of 15 people who were allowed in to observe. Neil Armstrong is on that list. Buzz Aldrin is on that list. Werner von Braun is on that list. Eugene Kranz, flight director, is on that list, and some other people I never heard of, including a science fiction consultant who would, write science fiction movies. And apparently the astronauts weren't even in the suits. They couldn't handle the heat from having the air conditioning units removed so they wouldn't fall over backwards. They had somebody bodybuilder type of person in those suits, but they observed, so they would have some sort of familiarity with what happened, so that when they later lied about it, they could do so a little bit more believably. And our source kept that list of 15 people, which I publish in my book. It's called Moon Man, The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List, because in the course of investigating this, I accidentally left a microphone on in an astronaut's house who I had just shown classified footage that we uncovered of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes, dated 2 days into the flight from the first mission to the moon, proving they never left Earth orbit. And when he, started cursing and becoming literally assaulting me from behind, we left a microphone on him accidentally, and the camera guy, so startled, he forgets to hit stop record. So while the camera's in the backseat of the rental car in the guy's driveway, we're recording the private conversations in his house with his son with the door closed, where they're talking about calling the CIA to have me killed, which wouldn't be necessary if they really went to the moon, and I'm some silly person who thinks it was in a TV studio. So that book contains all of this new information of the deathbed confession. There's an audio version that I read myself, and a Kindle or a print. And you can get it at sibrel.com. It also has 17 interactive video links. Basically, I write a chapter and say, look, if you want to understand the next chapter better, go to sibrel.com, click on the button that says Moon Man video links, and watch link 1, and then later link 2. All those links you can watch now for free. And we back up all of the things that I say. And sad to say, super sad, it's not a theory. They faked the moon landing. It's a fact. Because today, with 5 decades better rockets and computers, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into space is 1,000th the distance to the moon. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon, right? Somehow they can drive cars and play golf on the moon with 1960s technology on the first attempt, but 54 years later, they can only send mannequins to orbit the moon. You see, you can't have greater technology in the past and in the future. It's a scientific and historic impossibility. Then we have this footage of them faking being halfway to the moon. And then we have an eyewitness. And then we have photographs of what's supposed to be the moon, where shadows from 2 objects 5 feet apart are intersecting at 90 degrees, when sunlight is always parallel. That means it's an electrical light, which means they're on Earth, and you can prove the moon landings are fake in one picture. Some people say it's hard to believe that the moon landings were faked. I say it's hard to believe that they were real. What NASA is claiming is that they went 1,000 times farther than they can go today with 50-year-older technology on the very first attempt, with 1/millionth of the computing power in all of NASA than is in a cell phone. All the proof that you need that the moon landings are fake is in this one picture. In sunlight, shadows will always run parallel with one another. This is because the sun is about 1,000,000 times bigger than the Earth, and it casts shadows in the same direction over an entire continent. So you'll see in sunlight, shadows always run parallel and never intersect. Here's a picture which the federal government claims was taken on the moon. The astronaut shadow runs at 12 o'clock, and this rock, only about 5 feet away, the shadow runs at 9 o'clock. This is a 90-degree difference from objects 5 feet apart from one another. This proves that this was taken on Earth with an electrical light inside of a television studio. This is all the proof that you need that the moon landings were fake. If Toyota said that they made a car 50 years ago that could go 50,000 miles on a gallon of gasoline, and yet today their best car could only go 50 miles per gallon, or 1,000th the distance, wouldn't the fraud of the previous claim be obvious? And yet this is exactly the moon landing fraud, and yet people don't see it because of their emotional attachment to it. They're claiming they went 1,000 times farther 50 years ago than they can go today with 50-year-older technology. That doesn't make any sense. It's the only time in history that a technological achievement like the automobile or the airplane or nuclear power, that no nation on Earth could repeat it 50 years later, when in fact it should be 100 times greater 50 years later. If they could go to the moon with 1960s technology, men would be in another solar system by now. Men would have walked on Mars 10 years later, 40 years ago, which never happened. And there would be bases on the moon there today, of which there are none. It's the only time in the history of the world that technology that cost $175 billion was deliberately destroyed afterwards.
Would Bill Gates spend $175 billion to make the first computer and then when he was done, throw it and the schematics in the trash? But that's what NASA claims that they did. They only did that to destroy the evidence of the fraud, which is proof itself that they didn't go, because if they really went, they would never destroy the technology. The B-52 bomber was made 70 years ago and is still in service today in the United States Air Force because it worked so well. Now they want to return to the moon, and they're having to recreate all that equipment from scratch because they deliberately destroyed it in order to hide the evidence of the fraud. I say it's harder to believe that the moon landings are real than to believe that they were fake. And this one picture proves that it was taken inside of a television studio on Earth.
And when it dawns on you, I mean, I was producing the film under the theory it might be true that they faked it. I mean, I don't know. But you have to have an open mind. Obadiah says that pride blinds you from seeing the truth. And God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. And so a funny thing happened on the way to the moon opens up with the Tower of Babel. And in Genesis, it says it was only built to show off to the next nation, where our building is taller than yours, and it was never finished. Jesus said to start a tower and to not finish it, it's a testimony of what a fool you were. Then we show the largest machine built at the technological age, when radio and TV and telephone and telegraph and films was all getting started. They built the Titanic, and they put in print the ship that God himself cannot sink. And we know it was never finished either. It never made one voyage. And the Nixon, when he knew they were not on the moon, said anyway, putting a man on the moon is second in greatness only to God making the universe.
Oh, wow.
You see that? Yeah. And they did fake the moon landing. And these people are at large. You see, this is dangerous. And then my book also discloses something that's not in the movie. I mean, I had a millionaire rocket builder for NASA financing me. And to respect some of the relatives of the Apollo astronauts, they gave me incredible information that they asked me to delay the publication thereof. So it's not in the movie, but it's in the new book, including my 4-hour interview with the widow of the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon until he met a fatal accident, which his wife says was absolutely homicide by the CIA, because this guy was the most beloved astronaut of any of them. So they chose him to be the man on the moon first. But he couldn't understand how they could possibly go to the moon within a 2-year deadline at this moment in time, because they couldn't even get a wired intercom to work between two buildings. I mean, they have a stick with a bag on the end of it that's supposed to pick up the first moon rock. 6 weeks before they go to the moon, when they're practicing picking up the moon rock, the bag falls off the end of the stick. So how could life support and batteries and fuel and radiation protection work? So he's so frustrated that he keeps complaining, fix this, fix this, fix this, and they're not fixing any of it. He's like, how can you not fix things that the pilot of the vehicle to the moon is telling you to fix? What's going on? Because they knew they weren't going. They were probably going to fake it, but they had not at that moment in time told the astronauts. So he's so frustrated. A few days before he died, he took a bunch of reporters without permission up to the top of the rocket, where he affixed a lemon the size of a grapefruit and let them take pictures of it, calling the moon rocket a piece of junk, a lemon. Days later, his wife says on January 26, 1967, he comes home from work and says, "Hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today inspecting the equipment. I've been here for 3 years, never seen the CIA here one time. Why are they here today inspecting the equipment?" The very next day, the guy is dead from faulty equipment. So not only did they take a third of our income through federal taxation to fake the moon landing when they promised they were there, they used that money to pay the salaries of the CIA agents who killed our neighbors. You see that? And this country was founded because of tyranny. And they wrote the first document, not the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, that says when any government any means any, becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Well, the first one's life. They're murdering their own people, right? That's not my testimony. It's a testimony of the dead man's widow and his son, who's a 747 pilot. You see, this is very serious. They did fake the moon landing. And because it's a positive lie, naive Americans are defending their own murderers, thieves, and gangsters. It's Stockholm syndrome. I mean, whoever killed Kennedy, he's still dead. It's a tragedy. It's just changing who did it and why. Or 9/11, you can change who did it and why. It's still tragic. This is a positive lie. This is a boastful lie. This is pride. I got an email this morning, Troy. I couldn't even read it without throwing up, so I stopped reading it. I did Joe Rogan. I get this, it looks like 2 or 3 page, multi-point email from some guy who says, I know what I'm talking about. I'm in the aerospace industry, and I suspect he wasn't even born when they claimed they went to the moon, but he's defending them. Oh, you're wrong about this and wrong about this and wrong about this. Why would he care? If I'm going around saying Mickey Mouse was the first president and not George Washington, you think there would be 100 videos, 1,000 videos? Ever since I did Joe Rogan, there's all these videos to defend the moon landings. Why are they so upset? Right? There's a quote from a film. It says, the likelihood of one individual being right increases in direct proportion to the intensity to which others are trying to prove him wrong. Why would they care? Because I'm pushing their buttons, which are emotional. This is Santa Claus for adults. This is idolatry, right? Worshiping science, the crowning achievement of science. Well, their Messiah, AI, just said in November, right, that the moon missions are fake. They had a convention, and for me, it's like,
AI said that, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I used to go to the TV equipment convention, the latest cameras and whatever. Other people go to the automobile conventions where you can drive a car around the track, So they had an AI convention in November. Was that like 6 months ago? And it's the most advanced AI computer by far because it's multiple advanced AIs hooked up together in a network, the neural network. Billions of dollars of research, decades of research. It has a deep fake detector program that has never been wrong. You can feed it a video of Biden or Trump. It'll tell you in less than a second whether it's a real or deep fake. One team who could play around with it for 3 days had it write a symphony. Another team had it write a novel. And then one team took photographs from an unmanned probe, you see, much less fuel to go, no danger of radiation, right, to equipment. And they fed it pictures from the Chinese unmanned probes, photographs of the lunar surface, and said, are these real or fake? Said they're real, without question. Then they fed them pictures from the Apollo missions. Apollo, Lucifer, liar, deceiver. That's what Apollo means, hidden in plain sight. Every single picture it said was fake. Fake background, fake foreground. So either the most advanced AI in the world that took, if you add it all up, billions of dollars of development, decades of development. I guess Google just doesn't know what they're doing. It's a piece of junk.
Well, okay, back up I'm sorry.
Or they didn't go to the moon.
Right.
There you go. That's my opening rant.
No, that was awesome. I want you to keep going. But let me ask you something. Back up just for a second. You said that which picture did they say was authentic? The AI?
Well, the one from China has unmanned probes on the moon. I think they landed there in 2014.
So we have sent things to the moon then.
Well, I don't know about the U.S. China has, and the U.S. probably has sent unmanned probes there.
You don't think that those are fake either, though?
Well, I don't know. I do know that it's possible to send unmanned probes to them.
Okay.
It takes 1/100th as much fuel, 1% as much fuel. And there's a lot of radiation. One of the clips at sibrel.com is a NASA scientist pointing out that there's this huge field of radiation surrounding the Earth that most people don't even know about. I was never taught about that in school, but basically, starting at about 1,000 miles above the Earth and approximately 30,000 miles thick, is this radiation that has been there for however old the Earth is, that's created by the magnetic field. It protects us on the Earth from solar and galactic radiation, but itself is made up of deadly radiation. Every manned space mission has been about 750 miles below the beginning of it, except going to the moon. They'd have to go through it. And so the scientist says in this video at sibrel.com that the technology for an astronaut to survive going through the radiation to the moon has not been invented yet. He says it out of his own mouth.
Wow.
So, and then Elon Musk just said to go to the moon with humans, you have to ferry up 8 fuel trips to have enough fuel to go. But they didn't do that the first time. Shouldn't rockets become more efficient, more miles per gallon, less needed? And then we find publications from von Braun that say out of his own mouth, he says it's impossible to go to the moon in one rocket. He says it would take at least 3, and each of the 3 would have to weigh 800,000 tons. The Saturn V only weighed 2,500 tons. It's a difference of 30,000%. And he says these numbers are irrefutably mathematical. They can't be refuted. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It takes that much fuel. Elon Musk says it takes that much fuel. And yet somehow they had this technology to do it in one rocket against their own designer's math that he says is irrefutable. And so people want to believe this lie. It's glorious. It's patriotic. People are into science or aerospace or whatever. You know, look what we did. It's so spiritually symbolic that mankind's greatest accomplishment, the modern day Tower of Babel, is also an incomplete tower, because they've said they're going to return to the moon 10 times in 5 years, and they can't do it. They keep postponing it over and over and over and over again, but somehow they're ahead of schedule with 1/1,000th the computing power of a cell phone. How about that?
Right. Okay, so I have a couple questions. The 2 first alleged moon people that went to the moon were Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, right? How many times did they say they went to the moon from 1968 to, was it 68 to, sorry, I got that wrong. To
69 to 72.
Yeah. How many times? 6 times?
So the last mission was called Apollo 17. And that mission has more 90-degree intersecting shadows than probably any of them. So they never went.
Right.
They have the same equipment. If my Volkswagen Bug can't do 500 miles an hour, none of them can. They're all off the same factory. So no Saturn V could leave Earth orbit. That's why they destroyed all the hardware and all the schematics and all the blueprints, because someone could later figure that out. Do you realize that? They actually say out of their own mouth, it's one of the clips at sibrel.com, that they intentionally destroyed the moon landing technology.
Yeah, I think I saw that before. Yeah. Why would you do that? I think that's what goes through everybody's mind.
You went, but you would if you perpetrated a fraud. So that's
right.
Indirect proof that they perpetrated a fraud. They didn't even destroy the atomic bomb. If you're ever going to destroy technology, maybe you could say we're going to use this one time, we'll throw the blueprints away, and then we'll have a peace treaty. We'll never do that again. But just 10 years later, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. And so if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1/1,000th the computing power of a cell phone, we would have been on Mars 10 years later, right? Yeah. We would be in another solar system by now. We would be in another solar system. And there'd be bases all over the moon. There's bases at the South Pole, even though it has 100-mile-per-hour winds and 100 degrees below zero, because it's humanly possible. If it were humanly possible to go to the moon, there would be people there right now. There aren't, because it can't be done. Why do they keep postponing it? Because it can't be done. If it can't be done with 50 years newer technology, then it certainly couldn't have been done with 1960s technology. And then Elon Musk just said you can only go to the moon if you build a space station first and ferry up a minimum of 8 fuel trips first, because otherwise you won't have enough fuel. So somehow they could do it in one rocket in 1969.
Yeah.
You see, it's not adding up. The government did lie about it. The only problem is it's a positive lie, and people are defending their own criminal overlords.
Okay. So let's go back to 1968. So Stanley Kubrick, is that psyops, you think? Did he have anything to do with any of the filming? You've heard those theories, right? About Stanley Kubrick, and that maybe that's it. And if you watch The Shining, the movie The Shining, the little boy standing in the hallway, what's his name? Toby? I can't remember the kid's name. And he stands up. He's playing with his trucks, and he stands up, and he's got a little rocket that says USA on his shirt. And as he's standing up, the rocket is going up because he's standing up. And then the room number had something to do with how many miles the moon is away from, was basically putting innuendos in the movie The Shining, saying we didn't go there. And that's why he ended up dying mysteriously or something like that. But that's pretty far-fetched.
I have a little bit of a bad connection there. But yeah, I mean, he never says in the film that the moon missions are fake. He just has Apollo 11 symbolism in the film.
Right.
The fact is they did fake the moon landing. And the fact is the fake moon landing was filmed in 1968, according to an eyewitness. And the fact is in 1968, Stanley Kubrick was shooting a film about going to the moon.
Capricorn 1, wasn't it? I think the movie was Capricorn.
2001: A Space
Odyssey. Oh, no, yeah, right. That's right.
1978. But they did fake the moon landing, and they had to have somebody supervise the fake images. And they could hire the general of the media department at the Pentagon. They'd have good security, but then they'd have amateur results. Or they could hire the best filmmaker on the planet who was shooting a film about going to the moon.
Right.
I would have picked him, and that's who they probably picked. They had to have realistic pictures to fool the public, and if they didn't have that, they're sunk. So they probably did hire Stanley Kubrick. Years later, NASA gave him the most advanced film lens that could shoot under natural candlelight. There's pictures of the administrator of NASA with Kubrick before the moon landing. And so I suspect he was involved. It doesn't mean that they did or didn't fake it. It's just, it's incidental information. It's irrelevant. They did it.
Yeah.
Who did it? These people are in charge of our government right now. They're faking moon landings. They're faking the start of wars. They're killing their own president. I mean, if Bobby Kennedy Jr., who has more access to the JFK files, says his uncle with 100% certainty was killed by the CIA, I trust his researched opinion. If Robert McNamara, a defense secretary, says the whole start of the Vietnam War, the Gulf of Tonkin attack, was completely fabricated by the CIA, even though Congress passed a law called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution based on something that never happened. You see? So the CIA is controlling Congress, not the people. You see that? So if they're willing to kill their own president, if they're willing to send off 58,220 deaths of their own soldiers without reason, I don't think they're going to have a problem faking a video image. It's not too sacred for them to do. People say, well, it has to be real because they wouldn't lie about such an important thing. These are people who are murderers and embezzlers and arrogant and possibly satanic. You see? What a coincidence that mankind's greatest accomplishment by the most powerful nation on earth is a lie. You see that? How ironic in our fallen world, where it says in Luke 4 that Lucifer picks the world leaders. It says so. He says if Jesus worships him, he'll give him the nations of the earth.
That's right. One of his 3 temptations.
That's why all the world leaders are liars. They promise. I promise when I become president, I will not make this particular medicine mandatory of federal workers. I promise. And 6 weeks later, he makes it mandatory or you're fired. Why is that even legal? Why is it even legal for a world leader to pledge something and then do the opposite and remain in office? That should be illegal, shouldn't it? Why is it that one candidate of one political party gets twice as many votes as the other person, but they get half as many delegates over and over and over again? Why is that legal? You see, why is it legal for a president of a pharmaceutical company to retire and then become leader of the FDA? And why is it that a former leader of the FDA can walk out and become the president of a pharmaceutical company? Why is that legal? You know,
Right.
I don't understand this. Why is it legal for people who are in charge of our health to get royalties from medicines that they say are mandatory on government employees? Why is that legal? You see, it doesn't make any sense.
And I understand what you're doing. You're making an argument that, hey, this isn't unfathomable. And not only that, so I want to ask you, by the way, we're going to have all your links in the description section of my of the video for your website, every book that you want to plug, it'll be there. You hear it, folks? This guy's no joke. We have a mutual friend, the guy that's helping me get my teeth fixed. And he wanted I'm actually very honored that you're here. I know you don't normally go on small podcasts like this, but you guys got to get his books. He's amazing. I want to ask you though, did this have anything to do with the arms race? Was this something like some competitive thing we were doing with China or Russia at during the Red Scare and the arms race that was going on in the 60s?
Yeah, if the Red Scare was genuine, you see, at some point, if our government is killing President Kennedy, faking the beginning of the Vietnam War, and faking the moon landing, what point did the traitors take over? It had to be at least during Kennedy's presidency, if not sooner. You go back to Eisenhower, who was the chief general in World War II and D-Day, most important military event in modern history. And he was president for 8 years. And yet, in his last day in office, last day on his way out, oh, by the way, dark forces are taking over the government. Good luck. Didn't do anything about it for 8 years. I guess he was afraid they would kill him because they killed his successor for trying to do something about it, didn't he?
Right.
You see, so it had to be before then. And the Red Scare was during Eisenhower, you see? So.
Well, and the Russians today, the Russians and the Chinese say that they teach their students that we didn't go to the moon either. They're like the United States.
Yeah, I'm not sure to what degree that's true, but I do know that there's someone in the Chinese Space Agency who is a friend of mine who says everybody there knows the moon missions are fake and they're blackmailing NASA. They have a deal to get space technology, which is illegal for the United States government to give them. They're giving it to them anyway, under the table, in exchange for not exposing that the moon landings are fraudulent. After all, they have probes on the moon. They probably have pictures of the landing sites, maybe even rovers there that they can show the GPS coordinates of that show nothing there, you see? And so they're blackmailing the United States. I think Russia is doing the same. People say, well, Russia and China would have exposed it. Well, not really. A greater use of the information would be to blackmail us year after year, because if I had a picture of a world leader with a prostitute, I could upload it to the internet, take them down, and then it's worth nothing. I can't make $1 off of it. Or I could blackmail them year after year after year and let them ascend to presidency or whatever, and I'd still got that picture, and I still get money from them. 1 million this year, 2 million next year, 3 million next year. That's what the Soviets have done, because Vladimir Putin was there at the AI conference being shown the results that the smartest AI in the world just said the Apollo missions were fake. Wasn't surprised at all. In fact, he looked scared, like if the truth came out, he wouldn't have that power anymore. So, Eugene Kranz, the flight director, said someone in the command center at the console, heart of the space launch, can't tell the difference between a practice flight and a real one, just a bunch of numbers going by. So how could we tell as a 5-year-old watching it on our TV in the living room, which an eyewitness says, who confessed to a homicide to cover it up, says it was filmed at an Air Force base a year earlier. And they can't go to the moon today. They can only go 1,000th the distance to the moon today with 5 decades better technology.
Well, and I think the biggest thing too is that people that have no idea about this subject, the subject matter at hand, and we breeze by it on YouTube. You know, we're fed something in our YouTube feed, or maybe we're recommended a video about the fake moon landing because we're watching maybe other conspiracies. I've gone down so many rabbit holes you wouldn't believe, and I've come across this. Flat Earth. Was Von Braun the guy that believed in that talked about the Project Bluebeam? Was that Von Braun?
Von Braun talked about.
I know he was Operation Paperclip, right? He came over here.
Right. He was a Nazi who the State Department said that they were about to throw in jail for war crimes.
Right.
After the Apollo missions, that his, past was catching up with him. He did say before he died to his closest friend that the government was going to have a terrorist threat, which they've already done. The next will be an asteroid threat, either real or contrived, because they can fake asteroids from low Earth orbit craft that they have. And after that, he said they're going to fake an alien invasion.
Okay, so it was Von Braun. I was right about that.
Von Braun said that. I have another book called Aliens from Planet X, which basically my study of rogue planets indicates there could be a heavenly body approaching the Earth that could alter the climate dramatically. And it's dead. However, if it comes by, the government might use that as a ruse of misdirection. Aliens are using that as a spaceship, and they visit us every time this dead world comes by. And so the top 2 UFO researchers agree that UFOs are real, but they also add they're not from outer space. They're from Earth.
Well,
and they're demonic.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's my new book. First, there's Moon Man, which is about the moon landing fraud. And if you scroll down a little further, the book just came out about how aliens, while, there's some truth there, they could be fallen angels and Luciferian.
And not physical beings, but spiritual beings, correct?
Well, probably physical.
Or maybe even the same being that Aleister Crowley encountered.
Right?
Yeah, there's a difference between fallen angels and demons. Angels, we know from the Bible, have bodies, and they're similar to us. Although people who have good visions of angels, like angels rescuing them and things like that, they say they're tall. But demons, we know, don't have a body.
Right.
And they can have multiple demons in one person. So it's possible that a fallen angel could create a hybrid species that's kind of half angel.
I thought about that too. And that's their way of making a connection with the material world because they don't have a body themselves.
If such a creature died, that would be half mortal, half immortal, then maybe a hybrid human fallen angel because it has an immortal nature. And then that's where demons come from. Whenever one of these hybrid creatures dies, it doesn't go to sleep. Its spirit roams around. The good thing about the Bible is it's cut and dry. Life really is cut and dry. Either 2 + 2 = 4 or it doesn't. Either you're pregnant or you're not. Well, I'm only slightly pregnant. Well, I'm really pregnant. Or he's been dead only 3 days and this guy's been dead 3 years. Okay, well, whatever.
Right.
Dead is dead. And so God is, and good and evil is kind of cut and dry. And either they went to the moon or they didn't.
So
Either we're at war with demonic forces or
we're not, right? Yeah. I mean, you can't believe in God and not acknowledge that Satan's going to have his principalities and powers and his deceits and big lies and big productions here on earth to fool mankind, right?
That's right. And, our nation was founded to get away from King George's tyranny, and the tyranny of the federal government is 100 to 1,000 times worse. I mean, during this little thing we went through for the last 3 years, they actually told people you cannot go to church, when the Constitution says that the government will not establish or prevent the free exercise of religion. So they closed churches, and then they said, okay, you can have church, but you can't sing. And then they said, well, you can't have a wedding, and now you can have a wedding, but you can't have dancing. Or you can have a gathering at your home for your child's birthday party, but only 4 people. If you have 5, we'll throw you in jail and turn off your electricity. That's slavery, because we have one group of people telling another group of people what they can do in their churches and in their homes. That's slavery. How did that ever happen? You see, we're under so much more tyranny now than we've ever been in, and King George ever did. The one group of people is lording over another group of people. That's slavery. That's not freedom at all. And then they're murdering their own people, and then they're deceiving their own people. They're embezzling from their own people.
Okay, so you were on Joe Rogan. Was that 2 weeks ago?
3 weeks ago.
About a month ago, something like that.
Okay, so the reason I'm bringing that up is, how long is that where they're at that press conference? Is that pretty short? I can't remember. And
Well, I show a clip of it, and a funny thing happened on the way to the moon.
okay.
In my mind, there's 4 times the proof necessary.
Can you explain what's going on there and why that was so important for you to show that clip? And maybe I'll look for it and show it in between here.
Yeah, I mean, to me, we have 4 times the proof that they didn't go to the moon. We've got shadows intersecting at 90 degrees, which can't happen in sunlight, which means it's an electrical light, which means they're on Earth. End of story. You can prove the moon landing is fake with one picture. Then you have this classified footage of them faking being halfway to the moon with the 1-foot model of the Earth as if it's floating in space. The lights come up, and it's a mock-up of the Earth floating in space, which means they're pretending to be halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. That proves it. Then we have an eyewitness who saw them fake it at Cannon Air Force Base. Then we have the logic. You can't have 1,000 times greater space traveling technology in 1969 with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone than you can have today with 5 decades better rockets where they can only send people 1,000th the distance to the moon. That proves it. Now, incidental proof is the fact that we have a recording of them threatening to have me killed by the CIA, which would not be necessary if they went to the moon. We have the fact that NASA says out of their own mouth they destroyed all the original hardware, blueprints, schematics, telemetry data, where the rocket was, and all the original videotapes, which they would never do if they really went to the moon, but would do if they perpetrated a fraud. And then we have an incidental proof that you mentioned, their behavior at their first and practically only press conference, where they look like they're at the funeral of their mother.
They look very nervous.
Because they're lying, and they wish they weren't doing it. And if you look closely at the desk they're sitting at, there's 2 hidden teleprompters. For some reason, the only people in the universe who know what it's like to walk on the moon are being prompted with how to answer questions about what is it like to walk on the moon.
I have 2 brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may. When you were carrying out that incredible moonwalk, did you find that the surface was equally firm anywhere, or were there harder and softer spots that you could detect? And secondly, when you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
In rather flat regions, the footprint would penetrate perhaps a half an inch or sometimes only a quarter of an inch and gave a very firm response. In other regions near the edges of these craters, we could find that the foot would sink down maybe 2, 3, possibly 4 inches. And in the slope, of course, the various edges of the footprint might go on up to 6 or 7 inches, and compacting this material would tend to produce a slight sideways motion as it was compacted on the material underneath it. So we feel that you cannot always tell just by looking at the terrain what the exact resistance will be as your foot sinks into a point of firm contact. So one must be quite cautious in moving around in this rough terrain.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see. I don't remember seeing any.
You were a little bit concerned, you said, about stubbing your toe at the point of landing because the surface was obscured by dust. Do you see any way around that kind of problem for future landing on the moon?
I think the simulations that we have at the present time to enable a pilot to understanding the problems of a lunar landing, that is a simulator and the various lunar landing training facilities and trainers that we have will do that job sufficiently well. Above that, I think it's just a matter of pilot experience.
And Buzz starts playing with his papers. He gets a little lower, just slightly lower. He is stressed.
The things that occurred on and about the moon. We will use a number of films and slides, which most of you have.
He's doing a lot of swallowing in there, and you saw that last swallow was really tight, and so what we're seeing is that tightness. Then when he starts describing things about the moon, then we can sit there and look further into it. But just talking about the getting there.
And many people are convinced by their expressions. Something's not right. And then at the end of my film, again, you can watch it on the homepage of sibrel.com. At the end of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, we have Neil Armstrong on the 25th anniversary, while the president twisted his arm to give a public speech of 1 whole minute. High school students are being, passing through on a tour. He says to them, "Perhaps someday you'll be able to remove one of truth's protective layers."
Wow.
See? And he wouldn't swear in the Bible. I did a follow-up film. I put a Bible in front of Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
Swear to God you walked on the moon if it's so obvious. He wouldn't do it. Buzz Aldrin wouldn't do it. The only people who did it are avowed atheists.
Do you think what? So I'm feeling now, and don't get me wrong. There's going to be some people that watch this and go, "Troy, what are you talking about? You don't believe in the moon landing?" I honestly don't. I used to. And it's not because I don't think anymore you have to be some whack job to not believe it. I think why do you think there's been this awakening, Bart? What, and that's one question. The other is, were people just as skeptical in the late 60s, early 70s about this as they are today?
That's two questions. First, I'll answer the second one first. They did a survey in 1969, and apparently 10% of adults in 1969 thought it was fake. Even before they said that they're going to fake this. Somehow they had this sensation of it. Today, whenever they do a story about, isn't it, odd that people doubt the moon landings, they quote a survey from almost 25 years ago that says it's like only 10% doubt it. Today, it's about 25%. That's why they quote a survey that's 25 years old. And so is there a great awakening? It appears there is. When the executive producer published A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon with footage of them faking being part of the mission right in front of your eyes, that 2 NBC news directors agreed proved that they didn't go to the moon. That my critics agree is them faking being halfway to the moon, which they really wouldn't have to do if they were really halfway to the moon. And so that he thought, that's it. That's the finger out of the dike. It's going to come down. It's a little gradual because people are in such denial that they have to admit that they're wrong. Carl Sagan says, once a bamboozle has captured you, it's too painful to admit that you've been taken. And so I've talked to college professors who said that even if Neil Armstrong confessed on national TV that the moon missions were fake,
people would still believe it.
Walked on the moon anyway. That is, super deceived and frightful. And that's the state of America.
Well, and they all became alcoholics, right? They all had.
What's that?
They all went into deep depression. major alcoholics. I think Buzz Aldrin's the only one that's still alive. He's 96 years old. Or the other?
Well, I don't think he's that old. And there are other Apollo astronauts who are alive. He's the only one alive.
No, I'm talking about out of the three.
On the first mission. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I've met him on several occasions. I showed him the fake footage from his mission, in which he said that he was just a passenger, not a pilot. He said him and Neil Armstrong were only passengers, meaning they just orbited the Earth for 8 days, which is what
Wow.
film by them faking being halfway to the moon. And then he said, oh, and this makes you some famous person for having discovered this. How can I be famous if I'm wrong? And
not everybody's going after fame. Some people just want the truth, right?
I turned down the project. If you read the book, I turned it down. I didn't want to make this movie. I looked into it, and it seemed there was at least a noticeable possibility that they did fake it. And I said, I'm not going to risk my life, exposing this crime that Nixon did, because if they did fake it and I start looking into it, that could be dangerous. So I turned it down. It wasn't until I read the Bible 5 times from cover to cover that I realized there is a battle between good and evil, truth and lies. I'm going to die anyway. And if they faked the moon landing, which they did, that's so much more profound historically than if they had actually gone. The faking of the moon landing, the murder of the first crew who was going to be there on the moon, who didn't want to participate in the fraud, the printing on coins and stamps and waving the flag by the most powerful nation on earth, the defense of sincere people who are sincerely wrong because of their pride. The fact that they did fake it, that's so much more significant than if they had actually gone. So I changed my mind after 5 years, and I said, this is worth dying for. What they did was wrong. You can't have cancer and not know. And that's what the moon landing fraud is.
Yeah. The irony is it's just as big as the moon landing. It's the biggest propaganda stunt that ever probably happened on this planet, if you know what I'm saying.
It's the end times Tower of Babel. Latter-day Saints means you believe we're in the last days. I'm an Adventist.
Right.
We believe we're in the last days.
Yeah.
So in answer to your first question a moment ago, is there a great awakening? There appears to be. The Adventists have this philosophy, maybe you do too, or theology interpretation of the Bible, that there will be latter rain. We know from the book of Joel, which is right before the New Testament, which is quoted in the book of Acts, 2nd chapter by Peter, that in the last days, many, and I think it means believers, will have visions and dreams of the future. So there will be an awakening in the last days.
Absolutely.
Everything from God has a purpose, right? Romans 8:28, all things work for the good of those who love and serve the Lord. Death, car crashes, broken bones, all, if you're patient and loyal to God, will turn into a blessing in disguise. So the Tower of Babel rebuked was known to all the world at that time. The Titanic, after putting in print, the ship that God himself cannot sink, sunk immediately. The whole world knew about it. But this is still not recognized. So my belief is that there's a reason why this revealing is not immediate, that will serve God's purpose. So if you can imagine, Troy, there's a couple madly in love with one another. They get married. 6 weeks later, one of them is at a convention, gets insanely drunk. See, Adventists and Mormons don't drink. How about that?
Right.
Another common ground. And they have an affair. They wake up and somebody's in bed with them, and they go home and they have 2 choices. They could tell their spouse immediately, look, I blew it. If you want to divorce me, you have that right. I'm just not going to lie to you. Or imagine if they told them on their 50th anniversary as an old elderly couple, oh, honey, by the way, 6 weeks after we got married, I cheated on you. After they were known to be a faithful, honorable church elder for 50 years. You see that? The impact, I believe, is greater. Since I was on Joe Rogan, I see in the searches, there's one YouTube channel has 61,000 subscribers, but they did a video defending the fake moon landings, and it's gotten 200,000 views almost in 3 days. How is that possible? Because so many videos coming out in the last few days or weeks since I did Joe Rogan. Got to defend, hold up. If they really went to the moon, it doesn't have to be defended. The reason why it has to be defended is because it's made out of straw. The fact that it has to be defended is another proof that we didn't go, because it should speak for itself. I shouldn't get 3-page essays from people whose pride I prick, but the pride that I'm pricking proves that they're blind. That's what pride does. It blinds you. That prick, that essay on why the glorious moon landings must be real wouldn't need to be written if they were real.
Well, people would laugh it off.
The fact that I'm pushing their buttons is proof that their perception of the event is all pride-based, which means they're wrong. That's what pride does. It blinds you from seeing the truth, which means the opposite is true.
Yeah.
All these defenses are psychological and spiritual proof that I am correct, because if they really went, it wouldn't be necessary. And so that's the way that is. And I hope and pray. You see, logically, you know, I don't think the truth will come out until the second coming of Christ in heaven, if anybody cares at that point.
Yeah.
But spiritually, it seems like it might. You know, the rebuke of the Tower of Babel, known to the world. Rebuke of the Titanic, known to the world. Rebuke of the moon landing fraud, not yet. And they're defending it all the more.
But it is an elephant in the room. It is an elephant in the room.
I watched a video from several years ago. I uploaded it to my YouTube channel of some guy analyzing the behavior. He's like a lie expert. The body language of Neil Armstrong, the body language of Buzz Aldrin, while they're claiming they went to the moon. And it's all sorts of things that only liars would say it this way, you know, like a third person or whatever, other than they experienced it. And one of the guys, and he's kind of a scientific, academic type of individual. It's very powerful. He said, you know, I used to, you know, think they were real, and now I know better. And that's happening a lot. You know, you have to face facts. If you have cancer, you do. If a relative of yours is a child molester, you can deny it all you want. You can say, no, my dear old whatever aunt, uncle, you know, grandpa, grandma would never do such a thing until the day you die. But what if they were a molester? You see, you got to know these things. And these people are at large. These people are running the show, who faked the moon landing and killed Kennedy and did the Gulf of Tonkin to throw away 58,220 of their own soldiers. They're at large. And the moon landing fraud, according to an NBC news director, is the thing that, if exposed, will bring down the federal government more than JFK, more than 9/11, because people prayed. They waved their flag. They printed it on coins. They put it on stamps. They put it in the encyclopedia.
Little children believed in these people. Yeah. When I'm watching that panel, like you were talking about, there's Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and wait, who's the third guy again?
Michael Collins.
They look like not, when you said funeral, what came to my mind is they look like they're on the witness stand and they're being interrogated by the prosecution in court. They have their, do you know what I'm saying?
You know, I'm listening to you and I'm realizing there is a better description.
Okay, go ahead.
It's like they're eating manure is what it's like.
And I feel sorry for them. I feel bad for them, actually.
Well, you should, because Jesus said to. Jesus said, love your enemy. And I'm not mad at the people who do the wicked things around the world. I feel sorry for them. They will gain the world and lose their soul.
Amen.
And that's a bad trade. And so I don't hate these people. I don't hate, you know, I had a sister disappear who was probably murdered. I don't hate the person who did that. I feel sorry for them. And we need to love our enemy. Jesus said, if you don't love your enemy, you're no different than a pagan non-believer. It's easy to love people who love you and hate people who hate you. Feed your enemy, give him water to drink. That's God. It says God sends the blessing on the evil and the wicked. And the Bible says we're all evil. We're all wicked. All have fallen short of the glory of God. There is not one righteous person, not even one. I can't say, well, I only kill 2 people a week and he kills 20, so I'm righteous.
Right.
I mean, come on. We have to realize this. And the Bible also says, Jesus said, heaven rejoices more over one sinner who repents and over 99 righteous people who don't need to repent. These are the people we need to be converting in the last days, not just the people who are going to add Joseph Smith or the Sabbath to their teaching to be converted to our version of Christianity. We need to convert the drug dealers and the prostitutes and the Bilderberg group members, right? Those people. Imagine if an Apollo astronaut came forward and gave glory to God and asked for forgiveness. And one did. A man who I witnessed the moon landing fraud, who said he killed a friend to cover it up. You know, Mormons make excellent movies, excellent. Just the most beautiful short films are made by Mormons. There's a Mindy Glidhill or something like that she made, and then all the public service announcement the Mormon filmmakers made. Well, I want to make a feature film called Silence in Heaven. It's technically a secular film, but it's about a spiritual message based on this. It's not about the moon landing fraud, but it's based on a military person who kills people for a living, who is dying of heart cancer, who wants to get right with God, goes back and asks for forgiveness, and how he's having a hard time doing that while these weird end of the world events are taking place. So, you know, Silence in Heaven. I'm trying to raise $5 million to do this film about the last days to encourage the secular world to, you know, repent while there's still time. Wide is the gate, broad is the road that leads to destruction, and most to go that way. Narrow is the way to life, and only a few find it. And Jesus said he wasn't sent to the pagans, he was sent to the lost church, lost Israel. So when he says wide and narrow, that's to the church.
That's right.
That most people in the church may not make it. He says so in Matthew 24, because of the increase of wickedness, good being called evil and evil being called good, even in the church, the love of most believers will grow cold and they will fall away. Only those believers in the church who hold to the very end will be saved, right? Banquet hall is mostly empty. That's the way that it is. Maybe there will be, Troy, a great awakening. Maybe the moon landing fraud coming out will be a humbling experience that will help people realize, well, what else have they gotten wrong?
Yeah.
Maybe they're wrong about God. Maybe they're wrong about repentance. You see, I pray that happens. I think it'd be a glorious, glorious day. I'm not angry against the astronauts or even the people who pulled the trigger on JFK. Everybody makes mistakes. King David was a murderer who was forgiven. These people need to be given complete amnesty. Anyone in the federal government that comes forward and confesses a crime, homicide, genocide, whatever, needs to be given immunity, anonymity, and forgiveness. That's between them and God. The truth for the rest of us is so much more important than persecuting one or two.
Hello? You froze up there. Oh, there you are. No, you're good. Are you done? Are you, how much time do you have left?
Well, I got another meeting in about 20 minutes.
Okay, I love everything you've said. And the books are, let's go down the list. What are the links that you're going to send me?
Well, the main link is just put sibrel.com.
Okay.
You know, under there, https://sibrel.com. Everything's there. The moon book is there. The alien book is there. And they both have interactive video links. The moon book has 17 and the alien book has 29. And it's an audio book, both of them that I read myself and in Kindle or print. And it's all right there if you want to know the truth. And they both, even the moon landing book talks about, well, what does this mean psychologically, governmentally, and spiritually, that they did indeed fake the moon landing? It's very spiritually symbolic. Mankind's greatest accomplishment on a world that's run by Lucifer, the father of lies, you see, it all falls into place. That was actually did happen. And now what? What do we do?
Right.
The first thing is save yourself from this corrupt generation. Repent and be baptized.
And there's going to be people out there that subscribe to me that are going to disagree with me, but I'm sorry, folks. I'm with Bart here. My wife ordered your book for Kindle and I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to read it, which I should have read it before I came on here, but I did do some research. Let me read you something really quick. Whether you believe, so Joseph Fielding Smith was the nephew of the prophet Joseph Smith. He was also our 10th president of the church. He passed away in 1972, I think. But he was the 10th prophet of our church. Whether you believe he was a prophet or not, let me read you this. Joseph Fielding Smith, a prominent figure in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we call him a prophet. And what do prophets do? They make predictions. He made a prediction that man would never walk on the moon. This prediction was made in the context of a discussion about guided missiles and interplanetary travel, where Smith expressed doubt that man would ever be permitted to make an instrument or ship to travel through space and visit the moon or any distant planet. He reiterated this idea at a Honolulu State Conference in 1961, stating that man would never get to the moon because it was a superior planet to the Earth, and that if God wanted us to go there, he would, but he didn't feel in his heart that God intended us to be there. So maybe he was right. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, he is right. They haven't gone to the moon, and they still can't go to the moon. They keep postponing it indefinitely. I mean, so many times presidents said we're going to be on the moon in 5 years, never happened. George Bush said it, Clinton said it, Obama said it, and Trump said it. Now they keep postponing it. For some reason, they can go to the moon ahead of schedule with 1960s technology, and today they can't ever do it, even with 5 decades better technology. They didn't do it, and it looks like they can't do it. And by the time they would, potentially be able to do it, which would probably be at least 15 years worth of development, there'll be some global catastrophe like a comet or asteroid. By then, no one's going to care whether they went to the moon or not by that point. Let me read a quote from Carl Sagan. One of the saddest lessons of history is this: if we've been bamboozled long enough, moon landing fraud, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It is simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back.
Wow. And what do they say? Shame on fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. All right. Thank you so much, Bart, for being on the program. I really, really have appreciated. I've enjoyed this immensely. And then what we need to do is go read the book. Would you recommend the moon landing book first? Or
definitely the moon landing book is the most important one. People need to have an epiphany about it. It's an awakening. I mean, it's like having a cold glass of water thrown in your face, and you wake up and you realize you were sleepwalking. You thought you were awake, but you really were asleep, and you look down and you're 1 foot from the cliff.
Yeah.
If you have cancer, you need to know. And if they did fake the moon landing, you need to know. You need to know that these are gangsters running our country and world. Don't trust what they say. And if they fake the moon landing fraud, which they did, they will fake anything.
Thank you, Bart.
So,
God bless you.
Go to Sibrel.com if you want to know the truth.
That's right.
The tried and true toil and sweat and blood are in that book.
I'm looking at you right now. You must be like 10 years younger there with your glasses and you look pretty sharp. All right. Thank you. Sibrel.com.